Detective Comics 1067, Ramvi and Ivan Reis on the art. So, yeah. We left off last time with Batman being frozen by Mr. Freeze as he was fighting the werewolf Gale down in the sub part of the city. And this issue kind of starts off with him frozen, kind of starting to thaw. The wolf's also sort of just naturally starting to thaw because of all the wolf heat or something. Like,
yeah, so his body temperature, and I also took that up as the asthma, that the demon that he uses, right? That's been keeping him alive for decades or centuries at this point. That was going. So I was a little bit like, how's Ramvi going to get Batman out of this? Because what I've enjoyed about this Detective Comics run so far is that he's just beating the ever-living piss out of Batman, right? Like, he is constantly putting Bruce in these scenarios.
Oh yeah, he got
that shows that how vulnerable he is.
He got
that it's
put out for like 3 days, and he was on Jim Gordon's couch recuperating. Yeah.
There's that, and now with this is with the same with Freeze. You know, Freeze froze him to get him away from the werewolf and has helped him thaw out. And it's just one of these things that, like, yeah, Bruce is very vulnerable right now. This is almost above him, you know, and it's going to take, like, it's not, I don't want to say it's Gotham reminding him, but it's, you know, he is human. And I feel like he's going to have to embrace some bat demon in order to overcome these guys. And I'm here for that.
Yeah, it's actually kind of sweet that Freeze wakes him up and makes sure he's okay. It's kind of a nice heartwarming quality to it, you know. Pardon the irony of that, because it's Mr. Freeze.
No, yeah, that's where he had done this to help him, and then this, like, I don't want to call it a rehabilitation because Freeze is still a villain, right? But the way that Rambi has been writing these villains that aren't not the Orgums, from Two-Face to who else have we gotten? We have Two-Face, the League of Shadows.
Talia, Freeze.
Talia.
Like, they all don't seem as bad as the Orgums. Yeah, they all feel like.
And I almost feel like it's going to be Gotham versus them. Like, the concept of, you know, the villains are going to have to team up with Batman to remind the Orgums that this is their town. That's the kind of vibe that I'm getting. Also, I don't know, did you read the backup?
I didn't read the backup. No, I didn't read the backup.
There's more of that from Two-Face's perspective in that. So, but I like what Freeze tells Bruce here about, like, Gotham's his Nora.
Yeah, actually, honestly, I thought that was legitimately one of the best lines I've read in a comic book in a little while. Him sort of, like, basically recognizing that Batman has this obsession the same way that he obsessed over his, like, frozen wife, and then Freeze having to deal with the fact that his wife says, I didn't actually need you and I don't need you anymore. It's like Batman's obsession with taking care of Gotham, and the question is, like, but does Gotham actually want or need Batman to take care of it? And I think ultimately the answer is going to be, to some extent, yes, because it's a Batman story and he's more of a heroic character than Mr. Freeze. But the idea of, like, comparing those two things and putting that into Batman's head and putting it into our head as the reader, I think is a very fascinating, you know, thinking, you know, bit of thought, a bit of thinking to do.
Because we've always said that Bruce is obsessed with Gotham, but it's been more like in a familial way, right? Like, he only exists because of Gotham being the way that it is. But for Freeze to point out, like, yeah, it was an unhealthy obsession, and it was only after I realized Nora didn't need me, I was able to move on. I feel like at the end of this will be a big, you know, key piece in how we think about Batman.
Yeah, and let's not forget that Freeze just wants to be left alone in what is effectively his version of the Batcave, where he's got all these, like, the
ice cavern.
Yeah, he's got all these ice sculptures of his wife and stuff that he wants to, and he says, no, I just want to be left down here with, like, these memories, because as much as I've in some way accepted that my wife doesn't need me, I'm still sort of holding on to this memory of her needing me because it made me feel important. So there's this idea that we're dealing with a story where Bruce is maybe going to have to deal with the possibility that Gotham doesn't want him anymore as Batman. And I think ultimately, of course, there's differences, and I think some of the natural differences that will come out is that, you know, there's a difference between a person and a city, and the city's made up of people, and, you know, so obviously these are things that are going to come out as we're going through the story.
Yeah, and just what Ramvi's using with that, what we read, but that was the annual, right, of the history of Gotham.
The flashback,
the flashback is that, you know, it wasn't necessarily the Waynes that, you know, were the avenging person that time, is that Gotham will always have this Dark Knight that that'll work with it. And so I like what Ram V's doing here, where the Orgums are trying to get this, that whatever that device is, I forget the name of it.
The seed. I'm just going to call it
the seed. Yeah, it has a seed that keeps these themes constantly going. And it's going to be much to their detriment because it's also going to keep this Dark Knight. But it's going to have to be, Bruce coming to terms with that. Like, Gotham will always have a Dark Knight. It might just not be him. And that this is a cycle that's just going to keep happening. I think that's going to be the key to him breaking it. Especially after that conversation with Orgum, right? Like, it seemed like Orgum's like, hey, we're a lot alike, I feel like this is going to be that thing that makes him different, that changes Batman for the better.
Yeah, and then the family side of this issue, the Orgums are making their announcements. They're building this new place on top of where Arkham was, in honor of the village and the church that started the city and all that stuff. But we see like some of the ways that they're going to be doing things as the issue goes on. So they all take these masks because Gale almost got seen by Batman, like his real identity almost got seen. So they're actually concerned about that. So they've got these fancy, very dramatic masks that they're all wearing now whenever they're doing the stuff that they can't be seen doing.
I'm not gonna lie, I think it's dope. Like it kind of goes with that operatic thing that.
Oh yeah.
That when it kicked off, and just that each of them have like there's something more to these masks too, right? Like, that they just look like these regular type masks, but they're almost charged with this dark energy. And it adds to their mystique as villains. And I love the fact that Ram V has created these original characters that I don't feel like they're, I don't want to say copies, but there's no similarities to any of these characters with any other Bat villains, which I appreciate.
Yeah. It feels very different and unique. It feels like a fresh nemesis for Bruce to take on, especially if it's one where the entirety of Gotham and I think it's smart that the Joker's not around right now, and and it would be interesting if he does show up, because I think this idea of Bruce, at least in some level, even if it's not like an actual spoken alliance, and some level is on the same side with all the rogues of the city, I don't think the Joker can fit into that. So I think if the Joker does show up at any point, it's going to be, it'd
almost be a three-way war, because they wouldn't want Joker, but they don't want to team up with Bruce. And the similar is that Bruce is not going to team up with them because they have such different goals.
Of course,
so it'd be too much of a wild card.
Yeah, I think in a weird way at that point, the Joker like represents the true like unpredictability of everything. Like, and in no ways you can predict for him, so he doesn't really fit into either side's like world.
He's an actual Joker card, right?
Yeah,
He is wild, right? So, and that would work. But no, I don't think we're gonna be.
But in a weird way, though, if he does show up eventually, like, he could actually be like a thorn in like the Orgum's plans, because they can't predict for him, and maybe he'll do something that Bruce would never do that'll like kind of inadvertently save the day in a weird way.
Well, and get them off of their, get them on their heels a little bit so Bruce can make that move that he needs. I mean, I think that's the best case scenario, but it's kind of like Warren Jokes and Riddles, right? Where ultimately Bruce had to side with the Order over the chaos, because that's just the way that he is. But to me, the Orgum's orders on the opposite side, if we're breaking this down into like a D&D alignment, they're lawful evil and Bruce is lawful good, right? Versus Joker's chaotic evil.
It's just a case of like, is he going to show up into the story, or is he going to just keep him out of the story because he doesn't really fit into it in any way? Like, that's the real question, and I don't know the answer to that. But if he is going to bring him in, it'll probably be quite late on, I imagine. Also, I noticed that this part of the arc is called Something in the Way, and I wonder if that's an intentional reference to the movie, because it had the Nirvana song in the trailers.
True.
Just a thought. But yeah, you see, so the lady one with the eyes, like, she has like this eye mask that she uses.
Shabbat.
Yeah, she goes to like the Wayne building and like meets with some people. And at first I was like, why isn't Lucius Fox just here? And it's because these people are going to commit suicide later on because she's made them.
That got darker than I was expecting, but then I was like, oh yeah, it's Ram V. I read Swamp Thing.
So her mask, like, basically she's able to like trance them and make them like do what she wants, which is they're going to sell like a bunch of like Wayne real estate in the Narrows to the Orgums. and then all these people who are making these decisions are going to commit suicide in a variety of ways in a couple of weeks' time, to sort of erase the trail of like what's happened here. So yeah, super dark.
Yeah, so they're gonna do that, and then they're gonna try to take over the Narrows, which is they're calling the heart of Gotham. And all it kept making me think too is like this is the evil of gentrification, right? Because you're having these rich, this rich European family move in and raise the Narrows to the ground so they can rebuild and make it theirs. And just knowing how socially conscious Ram B is, just from reading Swamp Thing, I like that this is a thinly veiled shot at that kind of thing, especially with the way they did it with the dark. You guys are going to sell all of this because it's almost as if Bruce was keeping the Narrows around because he understands the power that area has over the city.
Yeah, and of course
spiritually,
as they're doing this, with the other guys actually burning it to the ground, and there's people running for their lives, and we leave off in this big cliffhanger where Bruce hears about this in the news, whilst Arzen's with him, to try and make friends with him. So the last page is him, gliding off towards the fire to try and save people and whatnot.
Great looking panel from Reese, because we haven't talked about the art too much. I like Ivan Reese, but it's usually within a lot brighter type stuff. So I always like him when he's doing Superman. This issue of Batman, it's kind of weird because of the shadows, and it doesn't look bad, but it just feels a little bit off to me. And then we get to that final with Batman gliding into the Narrows, and it looks really good.
I think all the stuff with Reese looks really good. I think Ivan Reese is great at big comic book action and big spectacle shots. Maybe isn't isn't the best necessarily at just the sort of tense one-on-one conversations, which I think all the Arzen and Organ family stuff is very much that. It's all conversations. It's all looking ominous out of the city and making speeches in the monologues and the narration and stuff.
For sure.
And maybe that's not Reese's strength, but obviously Reese is a very good artist, and when he has these big moments to play with, he
it doesn't look bad, but it feels like the pacing almost feels off. So, but yeah, no, that we get to that final page and it looks real good. So, like you said, the spectacle.
Yeah. And obviously you see Two-Face sort of in all this chaos at the end, watching some of it. This idea that, this family are going to be uncomfortably encroaching in all of the rogues gallery of Gotham and their place in this city. And we've already seen how awful they've been to Two-Face, and this idea that Harvey's actually the one pretending to be Two-Face and is being forced to do all these evil things is really dark and sinister, and one of my favorite things of this arc so far. So I love that they're touching upon these things and getting to it. So really good stuff. I've been enjoying what's been built in Detective Comics. It's the sort of thing where it wasn't amazing from issue 1, but the more it's been building and the more the groundwork's been laid and all that stuff. Because I wasn't in love with the annual issue because I for my various reasons, but all the main story I think has been building in a very compelling way, and it's a very different type of villain for Batman to fight. And so making another villain be somewhat sympathetic in this potential coming war is very interesting.
Yeah, and I believe that Ram V also said that Freeze is his favorite, so being able to write him this way was like a dream come true. So you could tell this is something that he's thought about for a while, and it really showed through, because we've dealt with Freeze in other stories of him dancing this, kind of noble line. And here it's, again, he's still a villain. It's like he's not rehabbed, but just like this understanding with Batman, it came off really well. So, I'm happy that Ram V gets to write, his characters at how he wants them.
Yeah. So, no, very fascinating. But you read the backup, so you can give us some intel on that.
So this is the final part of the backup featuring Two-Face. It's a lot of inner monologue still, and this is when he goes to... earlier in this series, they talked about he was supposed to kill this doctor. And it basically comes down to the Two-Face persona. The reason that Harvey is masquerading as Two-Face is because the Two-Face persona was in battle with the asthma that they had given him. And the Two-Face is trying to get control back of Harvey, but while also keeping this thing at bay. Until finally Harvey, denies the Two-Face persona so much that it can engage with the Asmer one-on-one and reveals that Two-Face wasn't created when Harvey, had his acid thrown on it. Two-Face has always been there. Two-Face was the thing that protected him from bullies. It's that dark side that exists in everybody that, are you willing to go there? And that with Harvey, with the way that he was raised, with the abuse from his dad and the stuff that he had to do, as a lawyer, the Two-Face persona just kept getting fed and fed until finally the acid was what allowed him to come out fully.
Yeah, and so, also literally gave him a face.
Right, and actually gave him a face, right? And so it's created the split personality because it had become so strong with Harvey constantly in battle of trying to who's getting in control. And that Harvey still has this strength because all Two-Face wants to know is who Batman is. And Harvey won't give it to him. And that's what's keeping him in check. So as we see this happening, Harvey's just going through the motions now because he wants the Organs to still think that the Asmer is in control and that the Two-Face persona has defeated it. And now Harvey's back to fighting the Two-Face persona and trying to maintain that he's still working for them. But symbolically, he drops that gold mask that they had given him in the main story, to show that, like, yeah, no, I'm working for myself. I'm working for Gotham. So it's another one of those, kind of how we got with Freeze, is that he's not involved in Orgham's thing because this is his Gotham too. It's not just Bruce's Gotham or Batman's Gotham. As the villains are starting to show, or the rogues gallery is starting to show, like, no, we're not going to take the city down either. So yeah, it was really nice. The arts, that kind of wacky, kind of like pop art style at times when we get the Two-Face persona and him yelling at Harvey. So yeah, so far so good. Like, I don't feel bad that I've been reading those.
Yeah, it's cool. All right, what are you rating the whole issue then?
So the main book, I'm gonna give an 8.5. The backup, I'm gonna give an 8. So I'll give the full book an 8.5.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to give it the 8.5 as well. It's building some really interesting things, and it wouldn't surprise me that if, much like running into Mr. Freeze here briefly, if we run into some other villains who can be at least a little bit sympathetic, over the course of the arc, to maybe be like, hey, yeah, these are villains, but there are villains, right? There are scoundrels, and ultimately maybe that's going to be a big, thing to play with later on, when we're really at war with the family. So.